Jinger Duggar remembers crying when a close friend started wearing pants. "I was broken-hearted." In the realm of reality television, the Duggar family has long stood as a symbol of unwavering religious devotion and strict conservative values. Their show, 19 Kids and Counting, became a household name not just because of the sheer size of their family but also because of the unique lifestyle they adopted. At the center of that lifestyle was an adherence to the teachings of the Institute in Basic Life Principles (IBLP), founded by Bill Gothard. This organization influenced nearly every aspect of the Duggar children's lives, from how they dressed to how they spoke, who they dated, and how they expressed their faith. Among the many children, Jinger Duggar Vuolo has stood out in recent years for publicly breaking away from the fundamentalist standards she once upheld. One of the most emotionally jarring memories she recently opened up about reveals just how deeply those teachings had been embedded into her consciousness. Jinger recalled with remarkable vulnerability how devastated she was as a young girl when one of her closest friends began to wear pants. While to the average person such a decision may seem inconsequential, to Jinger, who had been raised in an environment where modesty was equated to wearing long skirts and dresses, it was akin to witnessing a spiritual betrayal. She said she remembered crying, feeling not just confused but completely heartbroken. Her upbringing taught her that modesty was an outward expression of one's inward devotion to God, and any deviation from those visual codes was not only disobedient but spiritually dangerous. To understand why such a seemingly small decision would provoke such a strong emotional response, one must look more closely at how Jinger was raised. In the Duggar household, rules were not just family preferences, they were framed as divine expectations. Girls were taught from an early age that their clothing had the power to either honor or dishonor God. Pants, which were considered masculine, were off-limits for girls and women. The rationale was that wearing pants blurred the distinction between genders and could be a stumbling block for men, thus leading to sin. These beliefs were not optional guidelines, they were presented as black and white truths. When Jinger's friend decided to wear pants, it wasn't just a fashion choice in her eyes. It was a spiritual rebellion. It was a public announcement in Jinger's mind that her friend was walking away from righteousness. The tears Jinger shed weren't just those of a child seeing her friend change. They were the tears of someone who had been taught that eternal consequences were tied to outward appearances. That moment marked the beginning of a slow unraveling for Jinger, although she wouldn't fully realize it until years later. As she grew older and eventually married Jeremy Vuolo, a former professional soccer player and pastor, Jinger's worldview began to expand. Moving away from the isolated structure of her childhood home and immersing herself in different Christian communities opened the door for her to ask difficult questions about the teachings she had always accepted as truth. Jeremy, who came from a very different Christian background, encouraged her to study the Bible for herself. He challenged the legalism that had shaped her understanding of God. These conversations and studies became the fertile ground upon which Jinger began to rebuild her faith, this time with more grace, more freedom, and a more personal relationship with God. One of the first visible signs of this transformation came when Jinger herself began to wear pants. It wasn't a decision she made lightly. She wrestled with guilt and fear. She worried about what her parents would think, how her siblings would react, and whether her fans, many of whom still held traditional views, would criticize her. But ultimately, she felt a sense of peace with her decision. She realized that God's approval was not based on fabric choices but on the condition of the heart. When she first stepped out in pants, Jinger described it as a liberating moment. But it was also bittersweet. She thought back to the time she had judged her friend so harshly and she felt a deep remorse. She had cried because she thought her friend was lost, when in fact her friend may have simply been exercising her freedom in Christ. That realization forced Jinger to confront the many ways her previous beliefs had led her to misjudge others. She wasn't just re-evaluating her stance on clothing, she was learning how to see people through a new lens, one that was no longer clouded by man-made rules. Her journey has not been without its critics. Many followers of the Duggar family, and especially those who still subscribe to IBLP teachings, have accused Jinger of being rebellious or compromising her faith. Some have said she's trying to please the world instead of God. But Jinger has made it clear that her journey is not about rebellion, it's about seeking the truth. She has emphasized that she still loves her family and respects their right to make their own choices. Her departure from their standards was not a rejection of them but rather an affirmation of her own spiritual growth. Writing her book, Becoming Free Indeed, became another major milestone in her journey. In it, Jinger described the mental and emotional toll that growing up under legalistic teachings had on her. She admitted to experiencing crippling anxiety, particularly around the fear that if she didn't follow every rule perfectly, God would punish her or her loved ones. This fear dominated her life well into adulthood. Through her book, she hoped to not only tell her story but also offer hope to others who might feel trapped in a similar spiritual prison. She wanted readers to know that it's okay to ask questions, to challenge doctrines, and to explore a more compassionate and balanced understanding of faith. In recent interviews, Jinger has shared how her relationship with her parents has evolved. While they don't always agree on theological matters, they've found ways to maintain mutual respect. She appreciates the values her parents instilled in her, such as hard work, faith, and family loyalty, even as she charts her own spiritual path. It's a delicate balance, but one she is committed to maintaining. Jinger's transformation has also impacted how she raises her own children. She's determined to create a home where grace, love, and curiosity are prioritized over rigid rules. She wants her daughters to grow up understanding that their worth is not defined by their wardrobe. She hopes they will feel the freedom to explore their faith with honesty and courage, something she didn't fully experience until adulthood. As for the moment that once broke her heart, watching her friend put on a pair of pants, Jinger now sees it as a pivotal point in her spiritual awakening. It was painful at the time, but it planted the seed of curiosity, the first crack in the foundation of legalism that had long dominated her life. She no longer views her friend's choice as a sign of spiritual decline. Instead, she sees it as an expression of personal conviction, something that each believer must develop for themselves. Her story has resonated deeply with countless individuals who have walked similar paths. Former members of strict religious groups have reached out to thank her for her honesty. They see in her story a reflection of their own struggles, the fear, the guilt, the liberation. Jinger has become, somewhat unintentionally, a voice for those who are seeking to disentangle their faith from the legalism that once bound them. In her public life, Jinger continues to navigate the complexities of fame, faith, and family. She is still very much in the process of discovering what it means to live freely in Christ. Her message is not one of arrival but of journey. She doesn't claim to have all the answers. In fact, she is the first to admit that she's still learning. But she hopes that by sharing her story, others will feel empowered to ask their own questions and seek their own answers. What began as a tearful moment of confusion and sorrow over a friend's clothing choice has blossomed into a journey of self-discovery, spiritual freedom, and renewed faith. Jinger Duggar Vuolo has gone from being a young girl who wept over pants to a strong woman who now wears them with confidence and grace, not as an act of defiance, but as a symbol of the inner transformation that changed her life. In reflecting on her past and the long road she's traveled, Jinger often speaks with both humility and hope. She knows that her story may not sit well with everyone, and she understands the weight her last name carries. But she is committed to living authentically, even if it means walking a path different from the one she was raised on. And in doing so, she's offering a powerful testimony that sometimes breaking your own heart is the first step toward healing it. Through every step, Jinger continues to emphasize that her goal is not to tear down her family or her upbringing, but to build something new, something stronger, more compassionate, and rooted in truth. Her story is not about rejecting her past, it's about reclaiming her future. And as she moves forward, she carries with her the lessons of the past, the strength of the present, and the hope for a freer, more gracious future. Before Jinger Duggar began wearing pants herself, she had a hard time seeing her friends make the switch. The Counting on Alum 31 and her husband, Jeremy Vuolo, were joined by her sister Joanna Duggar on the Wednesday, April 16th, episode of the Jinger and Jeremy podcast to discuss the Duggar family's headline-making modesty practices. Jinger and her siblings were raised in an ultra-conservative Christian household and followed strict rules, one of which included women and girls wearing skirts and dressing modestly. Vuolo, 37, pointed out that while the family's beliefs seemed like another world to those on the outside, many people in the Duggars community followed similar guidelines. For you to do anything other than that was like a bombshell, he said. Jinger agreed that it was so normal for her and her sisters and even their mom Michelle Duggar to dress modestly. You kind of start to not think twice about it until you are surrounded with other people who are conducting their lives differently, and then that's something where you start to think more about, okay, why do I do what I do, she added. Joanna, 27, noted that there were also people in their lives that branched out from the modest uniform earlier on. To me, it was a big deal when somebody that always wore skirts started wearing pants, she said. Then I was like, oh, well, they know better. That was my attitude behind it at the time. Her sister felt similarly. I remember when a couple close friends started wearing pants and I was like so brokenhearted over it, Jinger recalled. I remember crying over one friend just thinking, why are they doing that? Without even asking or hearing them out as to why. While Jinger has been wearing pants for some time, Joanna revealed that she only took the leap 2 years ago. Her husband, Austin Forsyth, and their children played a role in the decision.